you remember your first guitar?
Yes, I do. Yeah, it was a plectrum guitar, not electric, a Broadway acoustic guitar. Cost about 12 quid.
As a kid, what was it about the guitar that first drew you to that instrument?
There was always one around the house. Both my mum and dad played the guitar a bit, and they used to do kind of amateur country and western nights and things like that. My dad was an avid blues collector, which taught me all about that at an early age. And there was always a guitar lying around. Only, funny enough, when I was 12 years old, for some reason I decided to learn the clarinet, which I tried for a year and got fed up with and swapped it for the guitar. But clarinet had me listening to Benny Goodman, and through Benny Goodman I heard Charlie Christian, who was one of my early influences. And in those days I was a bit of a jazzer, I suppose, when I started. Charlie Christian, Django Reinhardt, and Barney Kessel.
Of course. Did you go on and have formal guitar lessons?
Yeah, I had a year's lessons on chords, just learning the basic chords, and I used to play Django rhythms for fun. My teacher liked that kind of thing. And then I decided to teach myself the solo guitar.
Now, you spent some of your early professional days in, as many British acts did, in Hamburg. What was the scene like there?
Oh, it was amazing, actually. That was my first look into sex, drugs and rock and roll. I think I would just turned 17. And that was my first time out of England. It was 5 weeks in the Reaper Barn. Tony Sheridan was there, and the Big Three were there. Buddy Britton was there, Strangers, Davy Jones, Cliff Bennett and the Rebel Rousers. Albert Lee was round the corner in a club called the Top Ten. He was the first guy I ever heard play the hound dog solo correctly, which even Scotty Moore can't do. And let's say it was sex, drugs and rock and roll. What more can I say?
Imagine it must have been quite a competitive scene too between the bands. Was it difficult to distinguish yourself from the pack, so to speak?
I wasn't really trying at that time. I was quite happy to be part of the pack at that age, I think. Pretty pleased to be in there with the rest of the boys. The thing at the Star Club was there were so many bands there, you only got to play for like an hour. And most bands were jamming with each other and just trying to fill in the time. And that was really good about it. Round the corner at the Top Ten, Albert Lee's band, they had to play 5 hours a night. That was the totally other end of the stick.
Tell us about one of your early bands, the Jaybirds.
Yeah, the Jaybirds was a good band, actually. We kind of got quite big in Nottingham, and big local band, as it were, which was great. And every time we moved to London, we found we were going back to Nottingham to do work on Fridays and Saturdays, because we got the best prices there. But no, basically it was kind of R&B. We did early Elvis and a bit of Chuck Berry and Jerry Lee Lewis, and that was the basis of 10 years after, really. Still doing that stuff. Still love it.
And still going strong. Your original deal for 10 years after with Derham Records, how did that one come about?
Oh, it's a funny story, because Derham was part of Decca. It's all part of the Decca company, which is a very stuffy English company. And we'd done auditions. We'd done auditions for Decca, and they gave us this A&R guy gave us this pop tune to go and record. And that's where we did it, but nobody particularly liked the song, and it didn't suit the style. And we failed the audition. But before we failed the audition, we got a letter from another department of Decca, because we've been doing well on the London club scene, playing the marquee, offering us a record deal, which in fact was the first album deal, because previous to that you used to have to do a single, and if the single was a relative hit, then they'd let you do an album.
Yeah.
And this was the beginning of the kind of underground album deal scene. So they offered us a record deal, and we said, great, we signed it, and it was pretty bad, but at the time we were just happy to get a record deal. And about a month later, we got a letter from the other department at Decca saying, oh, sorry, you failed the audition. No, so that's all right, we've already just signed.
Looking back now, at what point do you feel that 10 years after really became the band that you set it out to be originally?
it was an evolutionary process, actually. Although I was very keen to play the blues myself, when we started at the Jaybirds, it wasn't often possible. The kind of gigs I was getting were kind of dance halls where you had to play kind of music that they could dance to. And I was always getting told off by the promoter. In fact, one gig I remember, the promoter said, "I know you've got another set to do, but we don't want you to play. We've had too many complaints. We can't dance to you." And that used to kind of encourage me in a way, because I didn't consider myself a dance musician. And some of these gigs, sometimes like 1 o'clock in the morning, we'd have a third set, and there'd be about 10 people left, and I'd play a bit of blues, and people would come up and say, "Yeah, that's really good," and gave me encouragement to kind of continue on that path. But until John Mayall and the Blues Breakers and the early blues boom in the 60s took place, there wasn't really a lot of cause for playing blues. And suddenly blues was popular, and I had this great repertoire from my dad's old records, and just happily slotted right in there.
Now, your performance at Woodstock is legendary, and I'm sure you've been asked to talk about it a million times. In hindsight now, how do you think that performance affected your career, both short-term and long-term?
I thought about it quite a bit. It wasn't the performance in the long run, but in fact it wasn't. We did the festival and then continued doing kind of 2,000-3,000-seater clubs, underground clubs in America for a year. It wasn't until the movie came out.
Yeah.
And of course, with the movie comes all the hype and everything else, and then suddenly we was thrust into 20,000-seater auditoriums, which was fun at first, but after 6 months I hated it, because there was no listening to the music. The underground scene, which I was brought up in and I loved, it was basically music first, and all the bullshit came afterwards, or didn't come at all, which was great, and bands we could go on in your jeans and T-shirt and play long guitar solos. That was what it was all about for me. So then suddenly I found myself playing in 20,000-seater ice hockey arenas surrounded by policemen with cotton wool in their ears, and audience not listening except maybe for the last number. And I thought, this sucks. So slowly I kind of de-escalated out of that. So in answer to your question, I kind of gave 10 years after his career an enormous jump as far as success in inverted commas goes, but it wasn't a fulfilling success. And I vowed to get myself back into clubs where music could be played properly and listened to properly.
Yeah. You gained a reputation for the frantic pace that you can play guitar. Did you feel a pressure on you at times from fans to keep that up, when perhaps you may have preferred to pursue other ways of playing?
Kind of. It's an effort. It was never an intention of mine to play that way. It's part of the adrenaline rush from playing live, and just my natural style, I suppose. But when I was criticised upon that, I did start kind of counteracting and trying to show that I could play other styles as well, which was wrong at the time. It was a mistake I made. I found out since you should never listen to criticism. The thing is now, I do my own thing, and if people like it, that's great, and if they don't, that's great too. And it's a much healthier attitude. I was listening, people would say, "Oh, Alvin Lee, Captain Speedfinger's all haste and no taste," which was absolutely untrue, because I had a lot of taste. And part of the speed thing, I always thought, came from the light and shade, because I would play slow and cool, and then I'd throw in a bit of fast stuff, and that would sound even faster. And I think nowadays there's some incredible guitarists around, like Steve Vai, but they play so fast all the while that after 2 minutes it just becomes a mess.
It kind of loses something, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I suppose people used to say that about me then, so I started it.
When did you realise you had the ability to play at such a pace?
Then again, that was an evolutionary thing. I remember when I was probably 18 or 19, somebody brought a tape back that had been recorded out in the hall, and I was amazed listening to it. It sounded impossible to me. And that's I kind of attributed that to adrenaline and the fun of playing in front of a live audience, and figured I must be doing something right, and if I wasn't thinking about it, I should carry on not thinking about it.
So you weren't really all that aware of trying to stand out and not sound like any other guitarists?
No, not at all. In fact, sometimes I tried to sound like other guitarists, but I didn't, because I've never been very good at copying. You know, a lot of the guitarists I knew when I was learning, they would play Chuck Berry solo absolutely note for note, or Chet Atkins stuff, which was quite hard to do, you know, all that finger picking. And I kind of admired them, but I couldn't do it. All I would do, I would kind of play something vaguely like it in the style, which turned out great in the end, because through that my own style kind of came through it. So I'd do a Chuck Berry style solo, maybe nick a couple of his licks and put my own around it, which in fact, although I didn't know it at the time, is the best way of developing your own style.
Now, you always seem to have maintained a strong following in America, perhaps even more so than England. Any reason you can pin that down to?
Possibly something to do with 30 American tours over 10 years. America, actually, I was always crazy about America. I grew up in England, watching American movies and liking American cars, and all I wanted to do was get to America. So when I did, I loved it, and a love-hate relationship grew out of that. Because I was always working there. I mean, we used to do horrendous tours. We used to do like 3 or 4 months touring with a couple of days off and then on to Europe and then back to America. But, I mean, it was great. It was a great place for rock and roll, especially in the 60s. Before the Woodstock thing, before the movie came out, that was a particularly good time. It was the psychedelic 60s, and it was a bit like going to Hamburg, only better. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll again.
Again, yeah. Just a different location.
That's right, yeah. A bit more sunshine.
You got Alvin Lee and company together in the 70s. Were you feeling a strong need or a strong pull to work with other musicians outside of 10 years after?
Yeah, it was, and part of that was retaliation for this kind of destructive press thing about Captain Speedfingers. I felt I had to... I kind of wanted to as well, because, I mean, to be honest, playing one style of music is a bit limiting when you're trying to kind of push your boundaries yourself. And it's all part of a learning process. I mean, I kind of took it a bit too far at first, because I didn't do any 10 years after songs. And it was a no-compromise kind of idealistic thing. I thought I'm going to play new music, and that means I'm not going to play old music. Had I done kind of I'm Going Home, Love Like a Man, and maybe Good Morning Little Schoolgirl in that set, it would have kind of been accepted easier. I know the audiences are a bit shocked, but strange thing enough, I took that In Flight album, and that's a version of that band on the road in the States, and got fantastic critical acclaim, but not a great audience response. Because it was a different kind of thing. It was nippy, funky music, and wasn't kind of blang blang.
Yeah.
We used to say 10 years after, it's as subtle as a Mack truck. Still is.
You have in recent times reunited the band for special gigs. How's that felt?
It went pretty good, actually. We did it kind of not too seriously. I got together in 1990 and a tour of America and a tour of Europe, but it was more like odd gigs than tours, actually, which is nice. And then we did that last year. We just did a few festivals, which we'll probably be doing something similar this year too, which is quite nice. We actually have got an American manager and might do an American tour and an album, but that's kind of in the fire at the moment.
Oh, terrific. So there are recording plans then?
Yeah. In fact, we put a couple of tracks down the other day, which was good. The boys can still play, amazingly enough.
Older and wiser.
Yeah, it's amazing enough everybody's still alive, actually. But they're all hanging on in there.
How are you in the studio? Are you a real studio hound? Do you like that environment?
I did overdo it, actually. I think somewhere between 19 let's see, what would it be? About 1976 and 1986, I was practically locked up in the studio most of the time. I recorded about I worked it out how many hours of recording. I've got about about 6,000 hours of recordings at Space Studios in England. And I've recently been going through all the logs trying to pick out the good stuff. And that's a humongous task. But it's coming out good, because I've just put some new old albums, actually, In Flight, RX-534, Pump Iron, and something else, I'll Let It Rock, which are albums I did in the 70s and 80s, and I've put them out again on Repertoire Records with bonus tracks. And I've got all these great bonus tracks out of all the jams and stuff that took place. Because in the old days, I've had some great bands together, and we've made albums and put the albums out, but most of the great music happens at the end of the song, where just after it fades, because you have long jams. And with CDs these days, you've got so much playing time. I can put this stuff out with the jams on, which is turning out great. I'm kind of enjoying that.
Playing live and touring, does that still have the same appeal to you as in the past?
It still has the same appeal, and I love playing live, but I don't particularly don't think I'd love doing long tours anymore.
Right.
Some of those, I think anything over 6 weeks would be a bit of a task these days, because it's something you do when you're young and you've got the energy for it. I found after about 6 weeks on the road playing every night, the spontaneity and the fun goes out of the music, which is a terrible thing to happen, because, if rock and roll playing live music becomes boring, then you've got a problem. So I try and break it up now, and as I say, I prefer doing odd gigs. I certainly couldn't live without doing odd gigs, because I love it.
Who's in your current band?
At the moment, I've got a three-piece band. Alvin Lee band is Steve Gould on bass, who actually did a lot of writing with me earlier on. I used to be with a band called Rare Bird, and a guy called Alan Young on drums, Powerhouse Trio, and it works great, actually. I had a keyboard player in there for a while, but in the end, one night he didn't turn up, and I decided it sounded much better and made us all work harder. So I love three-piece bands.
Looking back over your career, and obviously still going strong today, what would you put down as your secret to survival in the music business for as long as you have?
My secret to survival was never having a proper job. Because a lot of times in my life, drummers and other guitarists and people I know, they would, when the times got tough and they were kind of finding it difficult to survive, they would drop back on their proper job, go and get a job as a carpenter, which I never had. So I had to keep playing. I think if I'd had a proper job a couple of times, I might have gone back to it too.
Right.
So the answer is, don't get a proper job.
Advice for young players, don't get a day job.
That's right.
Who'd be some of the younger guitar players going around today that have caught your eye?
It's quite a few, actually. No names particularly spring to mind. There's this young guy, I forgot his name, a young guy in America. He's only about 14, I think. And he's just ridiculous, because he's taken everything from B.B. King, Freddie King, Eric Clapton, myself, Steve Vai, Eddie Van Halen, and kind of merged it all together. And it's kind of probably the next wave. Outrageous stuff. Yeah. It's interesting. I think Eddie Van Halen started off a kind of new concept in playing the guitar. It kind of moved up a gear. I remember when it happened, it was quite healthy for me, because I thought, watch out, these new kids are coming along and I better get practicing. Because they were doing some amazing stuff, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And
kind of kept me at it, which was good. Learned a few of Fast Eddie's tricks.
Now,
about time I stole some back, I thought.
Yeah, too true. Yeah. With Alvin Lee. Now, apart from the possibility of a 10 years after recording, any solo plans as well for recording?
Possibly. There's always that chance. I think at the moment I'm looking at the 10 years after. But a lot of the most likely releases this year would be old stuff. Because as I say, I've been digging back in the tape vaults.
Mm-hmm.
I'm working on this album called Lost in Space, because the Space Studios tape store has got lots of stuff that nearly got lost. And I'm picking out the best of that. And it's great, actually. I mean, there's two ways to go. You go the commercial route, and the record companies love, and pick out all the jams with George Harrison and Steve Winwood and Ronnie Wood, which is good in one way, but in fact a lot of the best music is just from great musicians and having a magic moments. And I've had a little feeler with that. I tried it, there's this Alvin Lee web page.
Yep.
www.alvinlee.com.
That's the one.
And that's the one. A little plug. And talking to there's a kind of fan club business goes on there, and they're all really keen on that, of course, In fact, a lot of those guys, they write in, they don't like songs that don't have long solos. Seems I'm the official long solo man. And I did this song called Don't Be Cruel on the In-Flight album, and it didn't have a guitar solo. I actually got complaints. They said, don't bother putting that one on the album because it hasn't got a guitar solo. I'm putting out these jams, which is just one long guitar solo, and they love that.
Are you finding while you're rummaging through all this old material that you're coming up with recordings that you don't even remember doing?
Not so much. Strangely enough, I remember most of it. The only reason I never listened to it back is because we used to spend all night recording. We used to probably record for 6 or 7 hours and record everything, by which time nobody was in the mood to spend 6 or 7 hours listening to it back. Probably all too drunk. And so it used to just get logged and put in the tape vaults. And so I kind of remember, and I used to write on the boxes, I used to write a good night or a bad night, or, and fortunately I kept a good log.
Yeah.
So I can actually look at the log and it gives my brain a jerk. But I've found a few things. In fact, there's a version of Midnight Special on the new Pump Iron CD on Repertoire, and I put on this Midnight Special. It was actually recorded in, I think it was like 1971 or something. A great jam with there was Mick Ralphs and Boz Burrell there from Bad Company, and Tim Inkley, a bunch of people. Really good band. And we did the Midnight Special, and it sounded great, and I kind of forgot about it.
Mm.
And 7 years later, I found it again and thought, well, that sounds good, and put a vocal on it, because the vocal was a bit loose.
Oh, yeah.
And it got really good, and then I forgot about it again. And about 6 months ago, I found it again, and so I put some new guitar solos on it, and it sounded great. It took 21 years to record.
21 years in the making. Wow.
There you go. But it doesn't sound that way, though. It sounds like it's all done at once, which is great. It's just the magic moments when you get a rhythm section, when you get even just a bass player and a drummer and a guitar playing together, you get the magic feel.
Yeah.
You get something real special. And you can't kind of organise that. It just happens. And fortunately, I've kept all those tapes. And now I'm in the process of archiving and saving the best bits. Up to my neck in tape.
Well, I'll let you get back to work there just before we wind up.
Yeah, I enjoy it.
What else is on your books for 1999?
I would like to come to Australia. I've been talking to Brent Eccles, well, only briefly, but I love Australia. I think I did that tour with Johnny Diesel, and it wasn't my kind of audience. I felt a bit like an alien there, but I really enjoyed the people in the country and the flying round.
How long ago was that now?
I can't remember exactly. It was about 10 years, but it might be a bit longer, the way things go these days.
Oh, well, you're well overdue for a visit then, yeah.
I think so, yeah. Yeah, it's just getting there. It's a big haul.
Oh,
but, maybe work that out now. It sounds good.
Oh, terrific. Well, we certainly hope it comes off. Okay,
yeah,
Alvin.
I hope so. Well, if it does, I shall come and visit you.
Do that.
We'll go live on the air.
That'd be fantastic. We would love to do that.
All right, John. Well, thanks a lot. Great talking to you.
You too, Alvin. I'll let you get back to work there, and we look forward to some more new material in the very near future, and that reunited 10 years after recording. Really looking forward to that.
All right, great. Thanks a lot, my old friend. I'll talk to you again.
Take care.
Bye, John.
Cheers.